Michelle is not a person that I knew before arranging this thing, but she is clearly very thoughtful and has something really special for you that might involve some embarrassing pictures of someone else who's in the audience, which is pretty exciting. Give me just a second here. Okay, Michelle Ploeger double majored in psychology and English at the Harvard of the Plains, Nebraska Wesleyan. Then earned her master's in psychology from NYU. Her current career is not the academic approach to psychology because honestly, she didn't want to move back in with her parents during the recession. So she's happily employed at QLI in Omaha, helping young adults recovering from brain and spinal cord injuries. Sounds really important. Thank you for taking time away from that to do this, Michelle. Please welcome Michelle Ploeger.
Thanks. Hold on to your asses, hipsters, because this is going to be different. So like Joe explained, I have that social psychology background. So with that in mind, I'm going to be retelling the story of Home Alone from a social psychologist perspective, and I'm actually really glad you're a bunch of creative people, because I'm going to ask you to use your imaginations as I walk you through 3 different scenarios to do that. So, in our first scenario, I would like you to picture yourself just as a younger person, and let's say it's Christmas morning. You wander on over to the neighbors to see what's going on, because there is a lot going on. You know that everybody had come over, there's tons of people, and they'd come over because they're supposed to be going on this big trip. But something seems to have gone wrong, and somebody seemed to have overslept, and so now there's just this chaos of things happening. People are running in and out. There's aunts and uncles everywhere, cousins everywhere, running around. Everybody seems to be doing something, but ultimately nothing seems to be getting done with all those people. But eventually what you notice is that people do get loaded in the van, luggage gets loaded in the van, and there appears to be a head count, and people seem to be trying to account for everybody there. But you notice too that you get included in that head count, but I mean, that can't be right? I mean, as important as remembering to take all your family members on a big trip out of the country, I mean, surely somebody couldn't have screwed that up, right? The embarrassing pictures. For the second scenario, I just want you to picture yourself as you are now, but I want you to picture that friend you've got, that crazy friend, maybe her name's Amanda, but she's that friend who you've had for forever, you really value her friendship, you truly, been friends for forever. But in this scenario, times are tough for Amanda. They are. She's out of work, she's down on her luck, but she proposes this great plan to get her out of this. She wants to rob houses, and she tells you about how easy the money is and how much it's going to benefit her, how good it'll be for her, and she begs you to go along with it. She's really trying to talk you into it, but in your heart of hearts, you kind of know it's wrong, and yet you kind of like push her on it sometimes and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that, but in the end, again, you're friends and you want to maintain your friendship, and so it really can't be that bad, can it? Which takes us then into that final scenario, in which I'd like you to just picture yourself as an 8-year-old boy, and you're an observant fellow. You're a very trusting soul as well, and you trust especially that the people that you care about, your family, is going to be looking out for you, especially in a hectic time like the holidays. But you also have that strong individual spirit, and in that spirit, you kind of have the sense that, well, I can probably take care of myself. But when the time gets tough, that's when you really call on that spirit to get you through. So you look at some R-rated magazines, you decide you're going to take on some bad guys, you're going to booby trap your house if you have to in the process, because you're going to do what you need to do. And in the end, I mean, that ultimately pays out for you. Not only do you get that sense of, yes, I could do it, I could overcome, but it also has an added benefit of you end up saving the day for your family, and it pays off for everybody in a pretty big way. So I ask you to kind of keep those 3 scenarios in mind as then we talk about my process, which, full disclosure, you noticed, I wasn't creative at all when it came to making up something new about the story of Home Alone. But what I think somebody with my background does is we creatively apply the things we know to situations you might not expect to find them. So I applied 2 specific theories to look at the story of Home Alone. So the first is the bystander effect, which, going back to that first scenario that we talked about, the main points that I talked about were that there was a ton of people, there was something that needed to happen that was really important, but ultimately that something got overlooked. And I think this really exemplifies the effect in social psychology called the bystander effect, which basically indicates that the greater the number of people in a group, the less likely you as an individual are to take accountability for jumping in to help. Just by being part of that group, you as a person are less likely to think that there is something that you yourself have to do. It's called the diffusion of responsibility in social psychology. So if you look around and you say, well, none of the other aunts and uncles are making sure everybody's accounted for, you're going to look around and you're going to say the same thing. But what we learned in social psychology, but then too in Home Alone, is that that can sometimes have some bad effects. I mean, somebody got left behind. The second principle that I looked at was called groupthink. And again, that's going back to that second scenario where I asked you to think about a friend and really to think about her as that identity that you tie yourself to. So think about that loyalty you have. Think about how long that friendship is that you have. And think about the ways that you're willing to rethink your own beliefs to maintain that friendship, which really gets to the heart of what groupthink is, which is another theory in social psychology in which people in a group are so concerned about maintaining that identity as a group that they're willing to even suspend what they know to be right in order to maintain that membership of that group. And when you think about it, I mean, this is big because think of how many groups we're in, just friends or this group right here. And I think it's cool in Home Alone. Marv and Harry's relationship to me perfectly exemplifies that because Marv has a conscience. I mean, he says he's just a kid, you know, he kind of like tries to get out of it, but in the end, he's willing to do whatever Harry wants because he wants to maintain that partnership. The third scenario is a little harder to put a concept to because really, I mean, Kevin exemplifies to me just real life. He's that unique individual who is unfortunately a victim to what's happening by the groups around him. But he still has that individual spirit that is so unique that you can't really put a social label on. So to me, I really find Kevin interesting in this story because as much as we as social psychologists are able to say we know how groups behave, because individuals are so different, it's in different scenarios so hard to peg down and to predict what individual people are going to do in a situation. So I guess from my presentation, different as it is, I hope that you take away just maybe knowing about some pretty cool things from the field that I care so much about. But two, I think what's also neat that we know is that just by knowing about these effects, we as individuals can often change our behavior, and a lot of times it's for the better. So